Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the mental health and personality factors that may be at work in the case of Joel Guy Jr. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. Here I'll be looking at the background of Joel Guy Jr., then I'll move to the mental health and personality factors. So starting with the background, at the time of making this video, there's not a lot of information about Guy's early years. We just see a few reports from relatives and friends. We know he was born in 1988 and graduated high school in 2006. His parents, Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy, lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. At the time of the murders, Joel Guy Jr. lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He had been a student at Louisiana State University for about 9 years, but dropped out in 2015. Apparently, he wanted to be a plastic surgeon. Guy was described as reclusive. His parents were married for 31 years. It was reported they were compassionate, kind people who had a great sense of humor. They were both engineers and were planning on retiring to a new home in Hawkins, Tennessee. They were both looking for Guy to become financially independent. They said he was going to have to stand on his own 2 feet. His allowance was going to stop. They were planning on moving right after Thanksgiving. They had already sold their home in preparation for this move. Apparently, they were going to tell Guy about the end of his support during Christmas. Other reports say that they were going to tell him right after Thanksgiving. But either way, it is reasonable to believe that he knew this discussion was coming. This dispute is thought to be a motive for the murders that would take place. 28-year-old Guy traveled to his parents' Tennessee home on November 23, 2016, to visit them for Thanksgiving. On or about November 26, he fatally stabbed his 61-year-old father 42 times in an upstairs exercise room and then waited for his 55-year-old mother to come home from a shopping trip. After she arrived, he fatally stabbed her 31 times. The groceries she had purchased on that trip were on the floor near the front door, suggesting that she walked in with the groceries and he attacked her immediately. At some point in the afternoon, he drove to a nearby Walmart to buy first aid supplies. In a video recording that was taken there appears to be a bandage on one of his hands. He also drained money from his parents' bank accounts. Guy dismembered the bodies and attempted to dissolve them in acid. For example, he put his mother's head in a pot containing acid and put it on the stove. Body parts were also found in 2 plastic containers. One of Guy's sisters reported seeing the containers in his car over the holiday. Guy did not complete the destruction of the bodies. Instead, he turned up the thermostat to 90 degrees and plugged heaters in, then drove to his apartment in Louisiana. When Lisa Guy didn't show up for work, her employer called the police. They discovered the bodies of Lisa and Joel Guy Sr. after making their way into the home. Joel Guy Jr. was arrested in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, after he tried to flee in his 2006 Hyundai Sonata. He had cuts on his hands that looked more than a little suspicious. He also left a notebook full of instructions about how to carry out the murders. It made convicting him fairly easy. He was found guilty in 2020 of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of first-degree felony murder, and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. Joel Guy was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was 32 years old at the time he was sentenced. Now moving to the mental health and personality factors. I'm not aware of any mental health diagnoses, and we don't really see a lot about his personality other than the evidence presented in the criminal case. We do know that he did not pursue an insanity defense, and he signed a waiver saying he wanted to be executed if found guilty. One potentially useful bit of evidence is that set of instructions I mentioned before. He wrote down what he was going to do. Let's take a look at the content of those instructions. In the notebook, he wrote, "Get killing knives." I find it interesting he specified the word killing, as if getting knives wasn't inculpatory enough. He felt compelled to add the word killing to it. It's like he believed when he was ready to commit the homicide, he would find like a butter knife in his hand and say, "Darn, why didn't I specify killing?" It just doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. If it were a DUI case, the equivalent would have been something like get drunk driving alcohol. He also put get sledgehammer and crush bones, in case he forgot what he wanted to use the sledgehammer for. He wrote douse killing rooms with bleach. Again, I'm not sure the word killing really adds any value here. He wrote flush chunks down toilet, not garbage disposal. He also wrote body gives time of death, alibi. He thought he could throw investigators off by making it seem like the murders occurred at some other time. In the notebook, we see bring blender and food grinder, grind meat. He did not actually end up using that equipment at all, but they were available to him. He included kill him with knife, clean up mess before she gets home, kill her with knife. So here, because he used the word kill, I guess he thought it wasn't important to specify what type of knife he was going to use. He wrote churn heater as high as it goes to speed decomposition. There's also writing about melting fingerprints and drying everything. Fingerprints have been recovered from scenes where the temperature has reached over 1,000 degrees, like where there was a fire. I'm not sure why he thought they would melt at 90 degrees. I assume he meant his fingerprints like on objects and not theirs like on their fingers, but it's not really clear with the situation. He wrote, set her phone to send me a text message. He was trying to establish that his mother was alive when he was in Baton Rouge. He also wrote, her life insurance $500K, possibly more, with double indemnity. This is where the police get the idea of the motive. He put, with missing/dead, I get the whole thing. Outside of being cold, this strikes me as immature. The statement, I get the whole thing, sounds like what a child would say, not a 28-year-old. Also, it makes me wonder, who was he talking to in this message? This was written for him. So he needed to remind himself that he was going to get all the money? Did he have some concern he might not get all of it, and he just wanted to be reassuring to himself? It doesn't really make any sense for him to put that in there. His notebook was found in a backpack in the guest bedroom he was staying in, so perhaps an entry stating, take this book with you, would have been appropriate. He also should have probably added the last steps, get arrested for murder, convicted, and sentenced to prison for life. It's a key part of his story that he left out. This murder was planned long in advance. Guy started going on trips to buy knives, chemicals, and other equipment on November 7. Right before the murders, it was said that Guy was acting cheerful and happy. So not normal for him, he was trying to simulate normal. So he was really not good at manipulation, but he was trying. Joel Guy Jr. was a disorganized killer who made nothing but mistakes in the commission of his crimes, assuring that he would be convicted. But he believed he was a master criminal, writing down all those instructions, trying to dispose of the bodies, planning to send that text message. At some point, it appears as though he truly believed he was going to get away with it, and this plan would fool the authorities. He was planning on burning the house to the ground after the murders. He was going to use a timer to start the fire, but he didn't do that. There is a theory that the injuries to his hands compromised that plan. It seems as though Guy just didn't have any clue about what he was doing. He didn't realize it was difficult to stab two people without getting injured. He did not realize that disposing of bodies is challenging. He left evidence everywhere. And then he drove away from the house, leaving the instructions behind. In addition to being disorganized, Guy appeared to be distant and he lacked empathy. He planned a double parricide, which is an unusual crime. The crime is even more unusual in that his motivation was likely financial in nature. He was also not afraid to have close contact with the bodies of his parents. It's like he didn't have the ability to feel disgusted or ashamed, at least not enough to deter his actions. The first responders were overwhelmed with the smell and the graphic nature of the crime scene, yet Guy appeared to tolerate those without much problem, although I imagine the smell worsened quite a bit after he left. It's unlikely that he was angry at the time he committed the murder. He might have been upset about losing the support, but the actual anger or rage would have likely dissipated by the time he committed the homicides. These are just cold, calculated murders. He wanted what they had, so he had to get rid of them. The best evidence indicates that his parents actually treated him pretty well. It was reported that Lisa Guy only worked so that she could give money to her son. This case doesn't appear to be about revenge for some type of maltreatment that he may have suffered at their hands. If anything, they went out of their way to be supportive to him. As I mentioned before, we don't know much about his personality. I'm not aware of any information that offers insight into his level of openness to experience. As far as conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, all those levels appear low. The low neuroticism would be fairly common for somebody who wanted to be a surgeon. Surgeons who are emotional and hysterical typically don't do too well, so being calm and having very low vulnerability are usually assets in that line of work. Double parasital offenders are almost always psychotic, but I'm not aware of any evidence that has been presented indicating psychosis in this case. In cases of double parasite where there is no psychosis, antisocial personality is usually indicated. A few characteristics of factor 1 psychopathy appear to align with his behavior, like callousness, lack of empathy, deceptive behavior, and a failure to take responsibility. His behavior also appears to align with a few narcissistic characteristics, like self-centeredness and a sense of entitlement. That brings me to the last question. Was this crime preventable? It doesn't appear as though it was. Based on what the victims knew, there really wasn't much cause for concern. The only circumstance one could possibly look at in a case like this and see a warning sign is the fact that a transition was taking place. And transitions are a time of more risk of criminality. But again, this transition was not unusual. Not many parents would believe that ending support to a son could result in homicide. Those are my thoughts on the Joel Guy Jr. case. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this case to be enlightening. Thanks for watching.